Imagine discovering that everything you've believed about Jesus Christ your entire life might be wrong. What if I told you that Mel Gibson, one of cinema's most prominent figures, has revealed something so shocking that it threatens the foundations of traditional Christianity? The man behind The Passion of the Christ, one of the most impactful religious films in history, has actually suggested that Jesus Christ is not merely a person. This statement isn't just controversial, it challenges centuries of established beliefs and questions our understanding of spirituality and faith. But before jumping to conclusions, let's delve into what really lies behind this declaration. Mel Gibson is not just a filmmaker with an interest in Christian faith, he has been deeply immersed in researching the figure of Christ. Over the years, he stumbled upon something unexpected, an interpretation that could radically alter the public's view on who, or rather, what Jesus truly is. Ancient documents, forgotten manuscripts, and mystical interpretations point to a deeper meaning. Jesus might not be just a historical individual but a symbol of a state of consciousness accessible to all. This idea isn't new and may have been one of humanity's most guarded secrets. Ancient writings like the Gnostic Gospels have long suggested that Jesus spoke in metaphors, meant not to be taken literally but as a guide for spiritual awakening. Carl Jung, for instance, saw Christ as a representation of the enlightened self, a symbol residing within each of us. Gibson's research led him to discover that the Church may have oversimplified or even distorted certain aspects of Christ's figure. The making of The Passion of Christ was filled with experiences that pushed Gibson to question traditional Church views. Jim Caviezel, the actor who played Jesus, reportedly underwent inexplicable events during filming, like being struck by lightning and feeling intense pain as if experiencing Christ's suffering himself. To Gibson, these occurrences hinted at a profound truth beyond the conventional gospel narratives, a spiritual truth that the Church might not have encouraged people to explore. If Jesus was not just a man but the embodiment of a sacred and universal knowledge, this could explain why some scriptural passages were removed or reinterpreted over time. Gibson began to wonder why the true nature of Christ wasn't fully revealed to the public and what secrets remain hidden. Mel Gibson's journey in search of the truth about Jesus Christ didn't end with the production of The Passion of the Christ. He continued to study ancient texts, interviewing scholars of spirituality, and examining manuscripts overlooked by the Church. These explorations revealed to him that the idea of Christ as a divine archetype was present in ancient mystical traditions, including Gnosticism and lost teachings of the early Church. These traditions suggested Jesus was more than a man, a representation of transcendental knowledge, a state of consciousness attainable by all. The Gnostic Gospels, discovered in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, in 1945, depict Jesus not as a separate divine being but as one who teaches the path to spiritual awakening. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, implies that the kingdom of God is not a physical place but a state of consciousness reachable here and now. This notion strongly resonated with Gibson, who realized that many of these texts had been omitted from official doctrine, likely to maintain control over the interpretation of Christ and his role in humanity. Moreover, the similarities between Jesus' story and older spiritual figures like Krishna, Mithras, and Osiris intrigued Gibson. Across cultures, there are accounts of saviors who died and rose again, bringing teachings about self-knowledge and connection to the divine. This led Gibson to consider that Jesus Christ was not a unique character but a representation of a universal cycle repeated throughout history to impart deep truths about human existence. Gibson's engagement with authors and scholars who view Christ as an inner principle, like Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, further solidified this perspective. Jung interpreted Jesus as an archetype of the self, the highest stage of human psyche. This concept suggests that crucifixion and resurrection symbolize the death of the ego and the rebirth of one's true essence. Gibson found this interpretation not only sensible within a spiritual context but also explanatory of why so many of Jesus' teachings focus on internal transformation, the abandonment of illusions, and the encounter with true light. It's no surprise that esoteric orders, such as the Rosicrucians and Freemasons, preserved alternative versions of Jesus' story, always pointing to a secret knowledge lost over the centuries. As Gibson delved deeper into these studies, he began to see patterns indicating that Christ's original message may have been distorted to keep humanity in a state of spiritual dependency. The idea that each person could awaken the Christ within themselves was dangerous for institutions that relied on mediating between humans and the divine. With all this information, Gibson started to question whether the Passion of the Christ truly conveyed the essence of what Jesus represents. While the film depicted Christ's physical suffering, Gibson now pondered if he should explore this other side of the story, one that reveals Jesus to be more than just a man, but the manifestation of a much greater truth. This line of thought led Gibson to consider new projects and to continue his quest for what may be the greatest secret about Christ never told. The next segment will explore how this discovery impacted his view on religion and spirituality. Gibson realized that understanding Jesus Christ as an archetype rather than just a historical figure could unsettle many. For years, the dominant narrative has been crafted to centralize Christ's identity as a singular divine entity separate from humanity. However, diving into the Gnostic Gospels and mystical traditions that survived in secrecy, Gibson saw that this perspective narrowed the meaning of Christ's teachings. For him, this new viewpoint wasn't a denial of the Christian faith but an expansion of it. The revelation wasn't about replacing Jesus but understanding that his legacy extends beyond a single man to a truth accessible to everyone. Early Christians, such as the Essenes and Gnostics, taught that Christ was a state of consciousness, a spiritual awakening that anyone could achieve. This knowledge was gradually excluded from official doctrine as the Church emphasized the need for intermediaries between man and God. For Mel Gibson, this discovery was crucial to understanding why Jesus' message had undergone so many modifications over the centuries. If everyone could directly access the divine, what role would major religious institutions play? This knowledge doesn't diminish Jesus Christ. Instead, it enhances his relevance by allowing each individual to recognize the divine light within themselves. Great spiritual teachers have always spoken about the importance of inner transformation, self-knowledge, and connection to something greater. Jesus himself, in various passages, stated that the kingdom of God is within you. Gibson realized these words should be taken as a literal truth about human spiritual potential. Resistance to this idea stems from the fear of changing paradigms deeply rooted for centuries. However, understanding Christ as a spiritual principle doesn't mean denying his existence or importance. It means looking at his message more deeply. When Gibson began sharing his findings with close associates, he noticed many struggled to accept this interpretation because it challenged beliefs they had held all their lives. Yet those willing to study further began to see that this view didn't weaken their faith but made it stronger. The audience can respect this concept once they realize spirituality is dynamic, with various interpretations of Jesus Christ having existed throughout history. Accepting that there's more than one way to view his figure doesn't mean abandoning the Christian faith but enriching it with new perspectives. Gibson believes that by exploring these concepts, people can find new meaning for their own spiritual quest. Instead of relying solely on rigid dogmas, they can experience a more direct connection with the divine and understand that spiritual journey is personal and profound. The most important aspect of this process isn't replacing one belief with another but allowing each individual to discover the truth for themselves. Gibson saw that Jesus Christ's greatest legacy wasn't his physical pain or sacrifice but the transformation he inspired in others. Opening one's mind to this view can lead the public to a level of understanding that may have been concealed for centuries. The next segment will examine how this perspective can affect our view of faith today and what Mel Gibson plans to do with this knowledge. Gibson understood that his journey to uncover the true nature of Jesus Christ was not just a personal quest but something that could transform how many perceive spirituality. He realized that the traditional view of Christ, significant as it is, might have been intentionally limited over the centuries to control people's faith. However, by exploring ancient sources, mystical studies, and forgotten spiritual traditions, he arrived at a powerful conclusion. Jesus Christ was not just a man but the manifestation of a divine principle that exists within us all. This knowledge may unsettle those conditioned to view spirituality as fixed, but for those willing to delve deeper, this revelation can be liberating. The impact of this discovery isn't merely theoretical, it changes how we engage with faith and spirituality. If Christ is a state of consciousness, then the path to the divine isn't external but within each of us. This means we don't need to seek salvation in something outside of us but rather work on our own spiritual journey, awakening this principle within ourselves. This teaching, found in the Gnostic Gospels, spiritual traditions of the East, and even in Carl Jung's studies, reinforces that Jesus' true purpose was to teach humanity to find God within themselves. For Gibson, this understanding doesn't lessen Jesus' power but magnifies it. Jesus didn't come just to be a martyr or a symbol of suffering but to show a path of enlightenment and awakening. Throughout history, many institutions have preferred to emphasize his pain and sacrifice while sidelining the more critical part of his message, the transformation of the self. Consequently, many have been taught to seek God outside themselves rather than realizing this connection has always been accessible within their own souls. What can we take from this? That the story of Jesus extends far beyond what we've been taught, that he was not just a man but a reflection of the human potential to attain a higher state of consciousness. This doesn't mean rejecting the Christian faith or denying its importance but understanding that spirituality is much vaster than any institutionalized doctrine. If Mel Gibson reached this conclusion after years of study and reflection, perhaps it's time we look at the story of Christ with fresh eyes, seeking to understand what has truly been hidden away over the centuries. And if this reflection has made you think, don't stop here. Knowledge is the key to understanding hidden truths, and there's much more to explore on this subject. So if you want to continue this journey and uncover more secrets that might change your view on spirituality, subscribe to the channel now. Don't forget to like the video, as it helps us reach more people eager to discover these hidden truths. In the comments, share your thoughts on this vision of Jesus Christ. Do you believe there is something that has been concealed from the public? Let's talk about it.